Hey everybody, welcome to the True Crime Squad. I'm Kristi Brower here with my sister, co-host, and partner in crime, Katie Weaver. Hey Katie.
Hello.
How's it going?
It's going just fine.
Yeah.
Yeah. What can I say?
I couldn't decide what to title this episode. Katie called it the Lying Liars episode. And I think that's a great title for today's court, because we are here bringing you the deets
I
from
kind of
the
wanted to
Vallow
call
trial.
it. Yeah. I kind of wanted to call it the epic saga of the tampon curls.
We learned something today, you guys. That's how Lori's curling her hair. She's wrapping them up in tampons.
Mm-hmm. A girl posted in a group on Facebook that she had a DUI in Island Park and ended up in the Madison County Jail. And her cellie was Lori Vallow.
Mm-hmm.
And she said it was pretty terrifying. Lori's not terrifying. It's just terrifying to be around her, like knowing who she is and what she's accused of. She says that she was doing her makeup every day with colored pencils and also every night wrapping her hair up in tampons. And that's where those jail curls are coming from.
Jail curls no more. Tampon curls, here we come.
Gel curls are out. Tampon curls are in. Yes.
That's pretty funny. I mean, it makes sense, honestly.
Right?
We all had those old kind of curlers, when we were kids that you just wrapped your hair around. I guess that's basically the same thing. I know that women get very creative in jail. For lots of different things. But yeah, that's kind of funny.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We thought that was pretty hilarious. So,
well, welcome. If you are here with us live, welcome to your chatters. If you're listening to us after the fact, welcome, welcome, welcome. We're glad to have you all here. And I know a lot of you are new and we appreciate you and we're glad you're here. And Kristi has 2 questions. Do you think there's any chance Lori would be found not guilty or acquitted? I don't. At this point, I really don't. Does Idaho require a unanimous jury in sentencing a case such as this one?
Yes.
Well, the judge will be sentencing the case.
Right. Well, that's true. As far as conviction, yes, they require a unanimous jury.
Yes.
But you're right. Sentencing will be on the judge.
Yep. So, as long as they're able to find her guilty of some of the very many charges she has, then the judge will actually sentence her.
Mm-hmm.
And she can be sentenced to life for what she is charged with. So
it seems to me like the defense, they're not putting up much of a defense. I don't know. I mean, I think they're trying, but I'm amazed at how many lack of cross-examinations there are. But even the ones they have are just kind of a reiteration. They're like, so you're saying you walked across the street then? Mm-hmm. Yeah, I walked across the street. Okay. There
are definitely attempts at discrediting by getting people to trip up by asking the same question over and over. And I heard, and we'll get to it, there are several ways in which today they were trying to spin what was said in a little different direction. And we'll get to that because we're finally moving away from Charles' death. Thank God. I think we've got the point here,
Mm-hmm.
And we're moving into sort of the next phase, which is when they move to Rexburg and all the stuff that happens there. So let's kick it off. Lori was in the jail, the tampon curls and a black jacket today, just looking her normal self. The first court started quite late today, almost a half an hour late. There were just some things they were apparently talking about, scheduling and various things. And anyway, that was kind of weird. So the state called Detective Nathan Moffat. He's from Chandler PD in Arizona. Blake was questioning. And of course, Archibald objects again. He objects to any of the conversation about Charles or anything that happened in Arizona. Moffat was the case agent for Charles's case at the beginning of it, and he did talk a little bit about what he saw and what he heard. And I mean, honestly, what he heard and saw and talked to everybody about was the same thing everyone else has. So I'm not going to go into it really specifically because it really it wasn't anything terribly new. Let's just say it that way. But he did talk about the bullet strikes, and there were a lot of objections about this from the defense, but talking about how, most definitely the wound in Charles' abdomen had to have been shot when he was laying down. Which, they've said that over and over, but, it's pretty darn hard to find something self-defense if somebody's laying on the ground when they're shot.
Yeah.
Let's see. He did confirm he is the one that did the investigation into the life insurance, and he's the one that got the information that Lori, in fact, did try to file a claim on that life insurance because she did not know that Charles had changed his beneficiary. Now, we've had some kind of back and forth about that. He's the one who did the investigation and spoke to the insurance company. He said, definitely she tried to file a claim. And that's when she couldn't. And that's when he found out that the beneficiary had been changed to Kay Woodcock.
Yeah. And that testimony was important because Melanie Gibb had it all twisted up and insisted that Lori knew before Charles died that she was not the beneficiary. And pretty much everyone else was saying that is not correct. And his evidence, I think, makes that quite clear.
It was really important. And that's really important when it comes to motive, because part of the motive was the money. We know it, So then we finally start getting into the stuff that happened in Rexburg. So the state calls Sydney Schenk. This was Prosecutor Wood. Sydney Schenk lives in Arizona now, but she lived in Rexburg, Idaho in 2019. She was a BYU Idaho college student, and she was looking for a job as a nanny on care.com. And that's where Sydney met Lori. They talked for a while over text about Lori coming to do some nannying and some babysitting with JJ. And then she actually came and met Lori for an interview to make sure that it was a good fit. Lori told her that she had a daughter who was in college and didn't live there, and hired her the day of the interview, hired her to start the next day. So the interview was on, these dates are really, really important. The interview was on September 18th, 2019. So Sydney comes the next day. She watches JJ on September 19th, while Lori went to the airport to pick up a friend, and that friend would be Melanie Gibb. So she takes JJ to a trampoline park, and then he gets to play with a friend for a while. Lori says, and there's so much unclear about JJ's medication. We've had tons of questions about it.
Yeah.
She said that Lori told her that she would give JJ his medication later because it helps him fall asleep. What medication she was referring to, no one's really sure. JJ had an episode playing with a friend. He kind of got mad, didn't want to share, threw an ottoman in the friend's house and had to come home. And he was really angry and upset. And all he wanted to do was go upstairs to his room and hide. And so Sydney just let him do that. She was aware of JJ's disability and behaviors and stuff. And it sounded like she was pretty comfortable working with him and understood, which I thought was a good thing.
Yeah.
So Lori came back, and with her was Alex and Lori's friend, and that friend is Melanie Gibb. And Lori paid Sydney, and she left, thinking that, this was not a scheduled thing. It was more of a Lori will reach out to her and, can you come for a few hours today? I need to go do some errands, or I need a break or whatever. So, so Sydney reached out a few days later because she hadn't heard from Lori. So remember, she babysat him on September 19th. So she reaches out a few days later, Lori tells her that JJ has gone to his grandparents in Louisiana for a month, and that Lori herself was in Hawaii for a month.
Mm-hmm.
And she said, reach out after a month and we can probably get you started back.
Yeah.
Lying liar from Liarsville. So she did reach out a month later, and Lori never responded to her.
Mm-hmm.
So outside of the family and the potential co-conspirators, Sydney really is the last person to see JJ alive.
Yeah.
Now here's where I started to see something with the defense that I went, oh, we're finally seeing some strategy. So Archibald cross-examined Sydney, and he asked her, did you think that this was going to be like a long-term babysitting situation? And she said yes. Archibald said, was there a set schedule? And she said no, but Lori had indicated that this would be a long-term thing, not a short-term thing. So there's leaning toward, I think, that Lori didn't plan for JJ to be gone. Lori didn't plan for JJ to be dead. She was setting up things for him that were meant to last long term, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is kind of where the prosecution is going.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because then they call Josh Wilson, and this was Spencer Rammel for the state. Wilson is the principal at Kennedy Elementary School in Rexburg. And that's where JJ went to school for a very brief time.
Mm-hmm.
He had provided documentation to the police for JJ's school enrollment. So he was enrolled at Kennedy Elementary on September 3rd of 2019 and was enrolled through September 24th. So remember, Sydney watched him on the 19th. By the time she called a few days later, Lori told the big lie about where they were. The last day that he went to school was September 20th.
Yeah.
So again, we're really looking at very clearly who were the last people that saw him alive.
Mm-hmm.
So Wilson said that he did meet JJ during his school enrollment. Archibald wanted to know if the school had a program for special needs kids, which they did. He wanted to know if there was special funding for that. And the principal really hesitated on that, but I think what he was trying to get at is, did they have a special education program? Because there is federal funding for that. He said there was. Archibald wanted to know, did Lori say that he was only going to be in school for 3 weeks, or was this expected to be a long-term thing?
Right.
And he was like, yeah, we thought it was a long-term thing, and that he was very surprised when JJ was unenrolled. The way that JJ was unenrolled is that Lori sent the school an email and said, we're moving back to Arizona, or, whatever. She told one of her stories that JJ was not coming back to school.
Mm-hmm.
So the principal Wilson, actually called Lori to, just kind of clarify with her, make sure everything was okay. And then he said, when she gets him into a new school. Oh, right, because he was going to live with his grandparents in Louisiana. Sorry, I can't even keep Lori's lies straight. That when he gets enrolled in the school in Louisiana, to have that school call Kennedy and they would forward his records on, right?
Yeah.
Well, Lori says, well, he's going to be homeschooled. He has a cousin with a similar disability, and they're just going to homeschool them. And he was like, okay, well, if you ever decide to put him back in a public school, just have them call and we'll send records. And he never received any kind of records request on JJ's behalf.
Yep.
Archibald kind of did the same thing on Cross about, expanding that out with, did she say it was going to be a short time? No, she expected he was going to be in this school long term. They're setting that up, which I think is interesting.
Mm-hmm.
These witnesses got through very, very fast today, and it's messed up the schedule. And there's actually no court tomorrow. They don't really have anybody to testify tomorrow. Everybody they've got, they thought today's witnesses were going to take 2 days, and everybody they've got for next week, they didn't have for Friday. So that's why there's no court.
Well, there's no cross. I mean, the cross.
There's no cross. Yeah.
There's no cross. I mean, the cross examination is either no cross at all, or it's 2 or 3 questions. I mean, it's so brief.
Yeah, it is. It's really, really short. So then they call Wynn Hill. Wynn Hill is the dean of students at BYU Idaho.
Mhm.
And he described their school management system and how they keep track of students who apply and who are attending and all their records and stuff.
Mhm.
And guess who never, ever applied to BYU Idaho?
Right.
Tylee Ryan, Tylee Vallow, or Tylee, what was the other? Or Cox.
Ah.
They actually looked it up with 3 different last names
Mhm.
with her birth date. Even though Lori said a lot of that stuff, it did not actually happen.
Mhm. Yeah.
So then there was a
No.
sidebar.
Well, just wanted to make a quick note on
Mm.
that. On Lori's lie about BYU Idaho never carried any weight because
Uh-uh.
Tylee was 16. Now she had apparently had homeschooled. She could have had her GED and enrolled at BYU Idaho. She could have been taking classes. She couldn't have lived on campus.
No.
16-year-olds are not allowed to live on campus. That's their policy up there. She could not have been living there.
Right.
I mean, not that any of you need that lie justified to you, but that's one thing that I guess Lori didn't think about at all, is that Tylee was only 16 years old. She wasn't old enough to go live at a college.
No, she definitely wasn't.
And that college particularly, that's their policy.
It is. And she tells this lie all over the place about her being in school. So there was a sidebar, and then the judge sent everybody to break. This is at like 9:45 in the morning. Today, everything went weird. Well, there was something they had to deal with. So we went to break. We came back, and the jury was not back, so that they could argue, because the state was going to be calling David Warwick to the stand. But they had a problem because David had reported that he had broken the exclusionary rule. So the exclusionary rule is for all the witnesses in this trial that they are, once they've been subpoenaed, they are not allowed to read any articles, watch any videos, listen to any podcasts, anything that's reporting directly on what's happening during the trial and the testimony of people in the trial. So Prosecutor Smith gets David Warwick up there on the stand, and I gotta tell you, this dude, not the sharpest knife in the drawer. Okay. So David Warwick is married to Melanie Gibb. There's been a lot of confusion about that. They are married. They do not even live in the same state. He lives in Utah. She lives in Arizona,
And
but they are
clearly
in fact
aren't talking.
Yeah, they're not even speaking right now, apparently. But so they kind of talk about how David Warwick testified in the grand jury. He testified at Chad's preliminary. He has been interviewed by the police multiple times. So we have a pretty good idea of what he's going to say. But he admits that after Melanie testified, he listened to 45 minutes of her testimony from a YouTube video.
Yeah.
He was sick. He was on medication. And about 45 minutes in, he realized he's not supposed to be doing this. So he turned it off.
Dear God.
Right.
I know he.
Yeah. So, he says he was concerned about Melanie and how she was doing, because she was very nervous about doing this, and she was mad at him because he was really sick and he was supposed to be in town with her when she testified, and he wasn't. He was going to be coming later because he was sick, and so just dumb. Okay. So, he said that they don't live together and that they have not been talking about the case, that he has not actually even spoken to her since she testified, other than a text message that said she was done and she was headed home to Arizona. He said he was only listening to her testimony out of concern for her. He says he's not impacted by what he heard. He says he didn't learn anything new, that this was Melanie's testimony, which he already knew about and was present for, basically. So,
I mean, that part I believe, but he knows damn well he wasn't supposed to do that. That was just stupid and entitled, and ugh.
Yeah.
He's
So
so aggravating.
it is very aggravating. And frankly, I think they probably should not have let him testify because I'm
Mhm.
worried about, the look of this. But
Yeah.
so Archibald is asking him, like, what have they talked about after her testimony? He says they haven't, other than to say that she was going home to Arizona. Um, he said he wasn't actually listening to her words. He was listening to her tone of voice to see how she was feeling. I mean, that was just like a collective eye roll in every courtroom that was a part of this today.
Also, stalker much? She's not talking to you to the degree that these
Yeah.
are the lengths you have to take to hear her voice and see how she's doing?
Yeah.
Wow, David.
Yeah.
Double wow.
Stupid.
Yes, very
So,
creepy.
so Archibald said, "So how did she sound?" And he said, "She sounded somber."
You think?
Yeah. So he wanted to know, who posted, whose video did he watch? And he said it was either Hidden Crime or East Idaho News. And it was specifically a clip of just Melanie's testimony. But he did also admit that since receiving the subpoena, he's also read a couple of articles about Melanie and one about Alex and Zulema. And David was very confused. He was very confused during this time and later when he did testify. I don't know when he actually read those articles because he changed what he said several times. Smith kind of
I
tried
kind of
to,
agree.
yeah,
His testimony wasn't that important.
it really wasn't. That's the thing. So Smith tries to redirect him, says he only listened to 45 minutes of her testimony, and that he hadn't read or listened to anything else that was actually related to the trial, which he said was true. And he said he wasn't impacted.
Yeah. And he may not have
So
been, honestly. I don't know what kind of medication this man is on,
I don't know,
but
but there is some,
who?
got to be. So, the defense asks that he be barred from testimony. So Smith wants, the court to consider that this wasn't willful conduct. Probably was. That he was just listening to his wife to check on her and that he did notify the prosecutor about it, blah, blah, blah. So, Smith said there are other remedies for this, which one would be to instruct the jury about what had happened and that barring the testimony is the most extreme. So Archibald said, we have the exclusionary rule for a reason, and that his motivation really didn't matter, that he did do exactly what he knew he shouldn't have done, and that the rule is to protect the integrity of this trial.
Mhm.
So the judge, kind of listens to all of them, and apparently they'd known about this prior because they had Smith had submitted some Idaho case law in cases where they did allow a person to testify after this because they didn't feel it was necessarily detrimental.
Mhm.
So he said the options are the witness could be actually cited with contempt.
Mhm.
They could instruct the jury about the noncompliance, or they could bar the testimony. So the judge decides to allow the testimony with comment from the defense during cross. So they can basically impeach his credibility during the
Mhm.
cross.
They can kick his ass during cross for what he's done. Yeah.
Which they did, except that they didn't even bring up this incident. It was real strange. Really
Maria
strange.
said, "Lock him up."
Right.
I don't
No
know if that's
kidding.
exactly what you said, Maria, but that's what I said.
Well, the judge said he thought it was a little extreme to actually charge him. So I don't know. So he gets back up on this. This all takes forever, you guys. Also, remember that David Warwick is fairly hard of hearing.
Oh
And
boy.
so they have to keep making sure that he can hear them. He is coughing and sounds terrible and has to stop for a drink every 5 seconds. Finally, they bring the jury back in because this whole conversation happened without the jury. So they bring the jury in. So then Prosecutor Smith starts talking to David Warwick, talking about being married to Melanie Gibb and how he met Lori through Melanie in Arizona. Apparently, and I had forgotten about this, David already knew Chad.
Yeah.
Chad had wanted to write a book with David
Mhm.
a while back
Mhm.
prior to this. And David had said no, that he didn't think that Chad was a good fit for him.
Mhm.
it's really apparent in everything that David says. He doesn't think much of Chad at all.
Mhm.
So then they all meet up. Well, he initially meets uh Lori at her house in Arizona.
Right. Well, no, David was a part of the AVOW stuff, right? I mean, he had also done
The
some
preparing of
speaking.
people
The
stuff. Preparing.
oh, that's right.
Yes,
The
he'd done
preparing
some
of people stuff.
speaking for preparing of people. He'd done some podcasting. Although it's really
Mhm.
clear to me that David doesn't actually know what a podcast is.
Ah.
And we'll get to that. Because Jesus Christ, that guy should not have put him on the stand. I'm just saying it. So he had met her in Arizona. He'd met Lori and Chad was there and Alex was there and Melanie Gibb and all this stuff at Lori's house in Arizona. And it was not long, only a few weeks after Charles died. That's the first time they'd met.
Mhm.
So then he met her again at her house in Rexburg, Idaho, the weekend of September 20th,
Mhm.
2019.
Yeah.
He was there to do a podcast with Lori and Melanie, the topic of which David really has no fucking clue, to be honest.
Mhm.
He was also there to attend a Book of Mormon conference that happened in Rexburg that weekend.
Right.
And
See, that's where I think David shines. My guess is that he is a pretty a pretty good Book of Mormon scholar
he
and
is,
like
I think.
historical, like church
Although
history scholar.
I don't think today was his day because he couldn't remember
No,
shit. But yeah,
no.
and he was also going to visit his son in Pocatello. So it was this whole
Mhm.
thing. He was going to stay. He was initially going to get a hotel, and then Melanie had said, "Oh, she has a spare bedroom, a spare bedroom,"
Mhm.
and so they ended up staying with Lori.
Right. Now, the name of the podcast was Loin Fire Throughout the Ages.
Oh, thank God it wasn't.
I made that up. Don't go saying that I said that.
Because I don't ever want to I never want to listen to that podcast. Ugh. So David saw JJ several times throughout the weekend. He never met
Yeah.
Tylee. He heard Melanie ask Lori where Tylee was. Lori said she was attending BYUI and wanted to be independent.
Mhm.
Lie.
Yeah.
David tried to interact with JJ. David has a disabled grandchild. And so, he had some interest in JJ's. This is what he has said. And he has said this in every testimony I have heard that he tried a couple times to interact with JJ, but JJ was not having it. And then he did see that JJ interacted with Alex a little bit. And then then he went out and played with some friends.
Mhm.
JJ did. And he said he was happy to see that JJ was like happy and enjoying himself a little bit.
Yeah. I mean,
Um,
I'll give him that. He at least gave a flying fuck about JJ, whereas no one else seemed to, including Melanie.
yeah, yeah.
Everything you hear her say about Lori's kids was so uncompassionate and dismissive. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
So this is when he starts hearing about the gathering at the 144,000
Mhm.
and all this stuff. And he is pretty immediately put off by it. He says, again, is this true? I don't know.
Yeah.
But he says that, Chad told him that he's gathering the 144,000. And David was like, well, that would be a pretty important calling. And that would have to come from the prophet of the Mormon church. You can't decide that about yourself. He said also, he talked about, that they were going to call their church the Church of the Firstborn, which is something that's referenced in some Mormon scripture. David could not remember what Mormon scripture, though. He and
Mhm.
Archibald went back and forth over it forever. I have no idea where it is listed. But David did not believe Chad
Mhm.
about this and was very skeptical about the things that he was saying about this stuff, is what he says.
Now, was this a conversation about secret combinations or?
No, we're getting
Okay.
there. No, so he also said he had noticed that Chad and Lori were very affectionate with each other. And David knew that Chad was married.
Mhm.
And so David said that he asked Chad, like, are you not happy with your wife? And what did he say? Chad said something like, that he was satisfied with his wife or something, some gross thing that I was like, you're an asshole. But anyway,
Yeah.
but
Yes.
he said that several years ago, Chad said several years ago, about 3 years prior to this, he'd had a dream that Tammy would die before Chad turned 50. And then after that, he and Lori were going to get married and they were going to gather the 144,000 and all this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
David, according to his testimony today, was real skeptical of all this, and he said he didn't believe it. Let's see. I feel like my tweets are out of order. I don't know. I'm trying to keep it all together. So they did do the podcast that they were there to do. It had something to do with something. I don't know. He couldn't even remember, which seems insane. But when Archibald started asking him about podcasts, he said, well, we do them for like preparing a people and campouts and reunions. What he was talking about is that he's been asked to speak publicly at various things. But in his mind, the podcast was the same thing because Archibald kept trying to get him to say, who is the audience for this podcast? David has no clue what that even meant.
Yep.
That was really clear. But so they do the podcast, and Alex was babysitting JJ while they did the podcast. Alex comes in, he's carrying JJ. We've all heard this story. Takes him up to Lori's room because David and Melanie are staying in JJ's room. He says he can't remember what JJ was wearing. We all know that JJ was wearing the red pajamas that his body was found wearing. That's been said over and over again.
I mean, that makes me think he didn't read, too much of anything or listen to too much of anything because the red pajamas have been talked about a lot.
He said he thought he had on camo shorts and a t-shirt.
Oh, maybe he did earlier in the day.
Maybe he did. I don't know. But then this is the night that David has a really bad nightmare. And Lori or Melanie wakes him up because he's having this bad nightmare. And she says she's going to go get Lori and have Lori get Chad so Chad can come and give him a blessing. And he made it pretty clear that the blessing was not his idea, and he was not all that keen on having Chad give him a blessing. But he said he did consent to that. But when Melanie went to Lori's bedroom door, Lori didn't answer, at all. And the door was locked. So they didn't
get her testimony, she said that she texted Chad twice and called Lori twice, and neither of them ever responded.
Nobody responded. And so that, I don't know, where were they? Good question. So
he also cleared up that it was Chad's neck.
Yes, it was Chad's neck that was scratched by JJ.
Yep.
We got that wrong a few days ago. That's kind of gotten switched up.
Well, if you go back and listen to Melanie's testimony, that could have gone either way. Yeah. I think that's why half the people in our courtroom heard JJ's neck and half people heard Chad's neck.
Yeah.
The way she said that, it could have been either person's neck, but it was Chad's.
It was. So the next morning, David doesn't see JJ. He says he asks about him. Lori said he was acting out. This is apparently the day when he climbed up on the kitchen cupboards and knocked off the picture of Jesus. And that's when she just was sure he was now a zombie. So and David didn't say the zombie part, but all the other stuff he did, and said that Lori said that he was with Alex. And David was concerned about him and had wanted to see him and was going to give him a blessing because everybody's just giving everybody blessings in this situation. Yeah. But he was with Alex and he never did see him and he never saw him again.
Yeah.
So then Archibald comes on. So Archibald just does his best to discredit with David, which I will say David made it pretty easy on him. It wasn't hard to do. So at the time that all of this was happening, Melanie and David were dating. Melanie was divorced. And he made a real point Archibald did of making David say that he, in fact, was not yet divorced, but was
Mhm.
in the divorce process.
Yeah.
It was some real Mormon shame, I felt like.
Oh, yeah.
Also, because he also made him say that he and Melanie were, in fact, asleep in the same room.
Mhm.
And there's been a question about that, whether Melanie was in Tylee's room or not, but no, they were in the same bedroom.
They lied about that, I think, at Chad's preliminary.
I think they did. Um,
I haven't
but
had the energy to go back and listen to that all again, but I am
and
quite sure that they lied about that.
and you know, if only Mormons are going to care about that, honestly. But he made sure to
Right.
make him feel stupid about it, which was it was just weird.
Right. Well, the defense keeps doing this. They
Hmm.
keep using Mormon terms, applying Mormon shame.
Yeah,
I think they're really taking for granted that their jury is
we
not
don't.
all Mormon people like it would
Right,
be if they had, kept this in Fremont County.
right,
But they keep saying and doing things that make me think they're not aware of where they are.
right. Although they do know the religious affiliation of the jurors,
Sure. Yeah.
so
No,
there
that's
may be
true.
more Mormons on that jury than we know,
That's
because it
true.
is interesting how this sort of comes off.
Mhm.
So he confirms with David what he does for a living. David is a general contractor, and has also done religious podcasts, although he doesn't know what that means.
Mhm.
Um, so, he met Melanie through their similar interests. He met Lori and Alex through Melanie. He said he remembers Alex as being fun and lighthearted.
Mhm.
Then they had a big conversation about preparing a people. And Archibald made it very clear with David that
Mhm.
preparing a people is not affiliated with the Mormon church, which is true. It's not.
Mhm.
And also that preparing a people is not a group, because it isn't. They're like a conference company. They're a company that puts on events.
Mhm.
Preparing a people got sort of talked about like this. It was this group. It's just maybe the people who attend their conferences are a group, but they are like a media
Mhm.
and conference company.
When this case
Um,
first all broke, clear back 3 years ago,
yeah,
they had even put a notice on their Facebook page, basically like, "Talk about us on your podcast and you're going down."
yeah, basically. And also Chad Daybell, who? Yeah,
Yeah.
they were like, we have nothing to do with this.
Yes, they did. Yep.
He also made a point of saying that this Book of Mormon conference that they went to was not put on by the Mormon church, which was
Mhm.
also true. It was put on by some local people in Rexburg. Um, Archibald just hammered him over and over again about his podcast. It was very clear that he was just talking. He had no idea what he was doing in the podcast.
Mhm.
But that he was talking about religious topics in interviews, and that he was not paid for any of these things that
Mhm.
he was doing. So David basically was just talking about his experience, his conversion. He's converted to Mormonism, and his spiritual journey.
Mhm.
So then Archibald asks about David's visions, and Prosecutor Smith jumps in with a big objection on relevance, and they have this big thing about whether this is within the scope or not. And the judge overrules Smith and says, yes, they can talk about this. So
Mhm.
then Archibald says, well, what about your visions about all the secret combinations? The one in Washington, D.C., and the one in England. And how about Russia and China and the U.S. being sacrificed for a one world government? With
Mhm.
no explanation about what a secret combination even is. And that's a Mormon
Mhm.
term that people are not outside of Mormonism going to even know what that means.
No, but never fear.
Yes.
We have you covered. And this is from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints website, and these are references to the Book of Mormon in case anyone's curious about where this information came from. Secret combinations are an organization of people bound together by oaths to carry out the evil purposes of the group.
Yep.
Kind of seems like Lori and Chad's group. I don't know.
Right.
The
But
father of
apparent
lies stirreth up the children of men unto secret combinations. I must needs destroy the secret works of darkness. Judgments of God did come upon these workers of secret combinations. Gadianton did prove almost the something something destruction of the people of Nephi. The story of the Gadianton robbers is a big part of the Book of Mormon. Anyway, so in case you're curious, that's what secret combinations means.
Yeah. I was blown away with this though, that there was no, he just used that term and then just went right on, and I was like, that nobody, a lot of people are not going to know what that means. So basically, he's had visions that all these different secret combinations are at work to destroy the United States and to attack the United States, which is interesting because it's very similar to what Chad's been saying. But I think right now what we have is like dueling visionaries. like, like I could totally see them like in a ring, you know, because it was really kind of funny thinking about that David doesn't believe in Chad's visions, but he believes in his visions, and they're both about the same damn thing. So that was interesting. There was a big objection around asking that question again. So then they kind of move on from that. And Archibald asks David about the vision he had while he was at Lori's house. Big objection, misstatement of evidence. Well, he's referring to David's nightmare. So then he and David have this big conversation about the difference between a vision and a nightmare. So,
what?
I'm like, what does this have to do with anything? So David says a nightmare feels like it's happening right now to you, and a vision is something where you're being shown the future. So
that's
all of this
is a good definition.
It is, but all of this is just kind of to make David look like a loon. Frankly, it really is. At one point, Archibald asked him if he's a visionary, and he says he doesn't call himself anything. But other people do ask him to come talk about his visions. Whatever. He wanted to know how a blessing would have helped him after that nightmare, and this is when he was kind of like, well, I didn't really ask for one, but that was Melanie's idea.
Because Melanie was all in. She believed all this stuff. She thought Chad was the bee's knees. Yeah.
So then he confirms that he did see the scratch on Chad's neck. He also says it really wasn't that big of a deal. It's just like he was digging Chad at every moment. It was funny as hell. But David didn't actually see the scuffle with JJ and Chad. Chad showed him the scratch. So they kind of go through the whole thing again about how Chad doesn't have the authority to be the one gathering the 144,000. And so Archibald asks if the podcast they're doing is to prepare for the second coming of Jesus Christ. And David says no, that the podcasts are to build faith. And then he kind of talks about a lot of stuff that sounds like preparing for the second coming of Jesus Christ. Like, Archibald wanted to know on that Monday morning when David was worried about JJ, did he call the police? He said no. And the reason he didn't is because Lori was just the sweetest, nicest, most wonderful woman on the whole planet of Earth. And it says all of these glowing things about Lori, and that he and the other people present, that their characters didn't match their teachings. He thought they were good people, even though they were spouting crazy bullshit, is basically what he was saying. So then they do a redirect. Smith says, okay, Archibald's been asking you a lot about dreams. I'm going to ask you about reality. Tell me again what happened the night of the podcast and the next morning. So it says Alex brought JJ in. He looked like he was asleep, took him upstairs to bed in Lori's room. The next morning, Lori said JJ was out of control. He climbed on the kitchen counters and knocked over the picture of Jesus. So Alex took him away, right? And that was where we breaked for lunch. But I mean, I don't know what they were trying to get out of David Warwick's testimony, but really what they got was just a lot of dumb bullshit, really.
Just a whole lot of nonsense.
It really came across badly. And I think that they should have just let him not testify. He screwed up. He just should have not testified, honestly.
Yep. Absolutely.
So then after lunch, the state calls Detective Bruce Mattingly. He's from Fremont County. And he is the one that served the search warrant on Chad Daybell's house on January 3rd of 2020. And he was there with FBI, and they took possession of a lot of evidence out of Daybell's house. It basically, this was just showing chain of evidence, like that he's the one that took them. He took them to the police station, and then we get into a bunch of other stuff about who took the evidence to Salt Lake City where it was to be analyzed. Like they're just showing chain of evidence that the evidence wasn't tampered with. So then we get FBI intelligence analyst Benjamin Dean. Dean works in the Salt Lake City FBI office. He analyzes information in criminal cases, and his job is to look for patterns. And he's also an expert in language and linguistics. He started on the case in March of 2020. He was reviewing tips. So when the kids were first, found to be missing, and they discovered that the last time Tylee had been seen was in Yellowstone Park on September 8th, 2019. There was this big press release that went out and a call for people. If you were in Yellowstone Park and you were at Old Faithful at this certain time on this day, and you have pictures or video, please send it to us because we're looking for, any more proof about this situation. Right. So Dean is the one who reviewed all those tips. He also reviewed the devices that were taken from Chad's house. And what they did is they took those devices, and they have a program where they download all the data from those devices, and then they burn them to Blu-ray discs. And he got the Blu-ray discs from that January search. So he kind of explained how that all works. The whole point of his testimony was to talk about the raccoon text message that happened on September 9th of 2019, which is when, we're pretty sure is the day that Tylee was killed and buried. And this is the day, so they submit, the texts as exhibits and all that stuff. This is when Chad sends the text. He says, I've had something like an interesting day. He was out working in the yard, and he saw a big raccoon running down the fence line, which didn't make any sense at all because raccoons are nocturnal. Anyway, that he said he shot it and he buried it in the pet cemetery. And then he lit a fire in the fire pit to burn a bunch of branches. So Dean talked about how...
to Tammy, right? Those texts were to Tammy.
These were all to Tammy. And then he said he's going to shower, and then he's going to the library. And Tammy texts, "Good for you."
I've thought about that text a lot of times.
I know. Yeah.
While Tammy is at work.
Yeah.
Earning their actual income.
Yeah.
Because Chad wasn't making a lot on his books. I mean, he was just letting Tammy carry them. And so she texts from her job, "Good for you. You're actually doing something."
Yeah, or "Good for you, dumbass." Why do I care about this?
Take a shower. Yeah. Like, what is this about? Yeah.
And then he texts later, "I'm back home now." So Dean had evaluated the way that Tammy and Chad normally texted each other, and it was usually really short, just to the point, like, "Hey, I need to put a check in the bank," or "This happened," or really basic short messages. And that text was different from the way all of their other communications had been. The narrative style and the length of the text was unusual. And so this text, he then reported to his boss. This is something that spurred the local police to consider what happened on that day on his property, because it was like a lot of explaining of things that Chad normally didn't do at all.
Well, good point, Paula. We've talked about this before. It is very creepy that in the text he used the word limbs, that he's burning some limbs.
Yes,
he was burning limbs.
That's gross as hell.
Yeah, that is awful that he said that.
So that
Yeah.
was his whole testimony. There was no cross examination and they released him. Again, no cross
No cross.
examination. And then we get Detective Sergeant Dave Stubbs from Rexburg PD on the stand. And a lot of things happened here. But the first thing that happened is we spent, I think, about a half an hour admitting exhibits from, these were all business exhibits, and a lot of them came from search warrants for Amazon, Ballard Insurance Group, Spring Creek Book Company business records, Expedia for travel records, like 10,000 Verizon accounts, the Hampton Inn, Tammy's Gmail and Fitbit accounts, Rise Broadband, Southwest Life Insurance, which was actually Joe Ryan's insurance. Let's see, T-Mobile cell phone accounts, AT&T cell phone accounts. This went on forever. It took like a half an hour just to admit these. Okay. So this was a lot of the investigation that the Rexburg police did. So they admitted all these documents so that then Stubbs could testify to them, basically. Yeah. But Stubbs had a rough day. Let me just say that I would hope that a detective, like a sergeant, detective, bigwig, he's a supervisor of detectives, would maybe do a little better job on the stand than this, because he was so confused and he confused the shit out of everyone. So he talked about how Fremont County asked Rexburg PD to help them to do some surveillance when they were trying to find the Jeep. And this started on November 1st of 2019. So he did some surveillance at Lori's apartment. They didn't find the Jeep there, but they followed Chad and Lori to Idaho Falls, where they went to Hobby Lobby and the credit union, and they have pictures of them, So they talk about all that. They enter the photos into the exhibit. Lori's got her head on Chad's shoulder as they're walking in to Hobby Lobby. This is literally 2 weeks after Tammy died.
Yeah.
So anyway, they do finally find the Jeep, and Rexburg PD tows it to their impound lot. That was on November 4th.
And I'd like you to know that I spent the better part of the afternoon trying to find the Jeep, because we're quite sure it's still impounded here in Rexburg. So I really wanted to show it to you guys, but we couldn't find it. But I finally got a tip on it late this afternoon, so I still have an idea. But anyway.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So this is where things start to go to hell, because Stubbs just, I don't know if he was nervous, if he needed to drink more Mountain Dew. I have no idea. So the prosecutor asks, who owned the Jeep? And he says the title of the Jeep was in the names of Joe Ryan and Tylee Ryan. And Smith kind of looks at him, or whatever prosecutor it was. I think it was Smith. And then we all kind of look at him like, it wasn't Joe Ryan. It was Charles Vallow.
That Jeep was bought a year and a half after Joe Ryan died.
Yeah, it couldn't have been
a
Joe
year-ish around.
So
yeah.
She prompts him a couple times. Are you sure that's Joe Ryan? Oh no, I'm pretty sure it said Joe Ryan. And and she's like, are you sure that wasn't Charles Vallow? Oh no, I'm pretty sure it was Joe Ryan. So they just go on knowing that this is friggin' wrong. And in our courtroom, we're all sort of looking at each other like, what the hell? So then he gets real mixed up, because she starts asking him about the date of the welfare check that was done at Lori's house when they were looking for JJ after Kay reported to the Chandler police where they were and what was happening, right? And he says, yeah, that was on September 26th. September, right? And the prosecutor goes, September? Are you sure about that? Yeah, I think so. And then she said, so the Jeep was found on November 4th. Yeah. She goes, so was that welfare check? Was that before or after the Jeep was found? And he's like, well, it was after the Jeep was found.
Oh, for the love of God.
September 26th is after November
Dave, what
4th.
the hell are you doing?
This went around. It went round and round forever, and I was just like, "Are you freaking kidding me right now?" It was so annoying. I was like, "You are doing a terrible job right now, sir." So they finally get it worked out that it was November 26th, you dumbass. Okay. So Stubbs is a supervisor, right? So Hermosillo and Hope go to Lori's house first on the 26th.
Yeah.
Lori is acting, everyone's acting real questionable. Chad lies about how even knowing Lori or even having her phone number, all that stuff
Mhm.
happens, right?
And don't
So
forget that Hope and Hermosillo have both been raked by Chad as translated beings who are dark.
yes,
There's
yeah,
only 50 on the whole planet.
I know. And two of them are in the Rexford PD. My God.
Yeah.
So basically, Hermosillo comes back and says, "Hey, I think you ought to go over there and check that out because something is not right." And so Stubbs and Detective Ball go over there, and Stubbs decides to turn on his body cam when they go to talk to Lori.
Mhm.
And so this is when Stubbs' stuff kind of got better because we got to see the body cam, and then we didn't have to listen to him continually fuck up stuff. So they admit the body cam into evidence. So we review the body cam. They notice that Lori's car, which was a blue Subaru, is home.
Mhm.
And Ball knocks on the door. Lori opens the door and, she's kind of like, "What are you guys doing here?" "There were already police here." And she's flipping her hair and, doing the Lori thing. And
Mhm.
she tells
Shining
them
up
that,
that golden vagina.
yeah, she really, really was.
Mhm.
So then she says, she's not alone in the house. Alex is there, but you don't ever see Alex. He never comes in and joins the conversation. So they start asking her about,
Wait, can I ask, do they come into the house or is this all at the doorway?
they come in.
Uh-huh, okay.
They come in and they're kind of standing, not very far into the house, but they are inside the house.
Mhm.
They're asking Lori about where JJ is and kind of what's going on here. And
Mhm.
so she says, "Oh, he's with her friend in Arizona and it's no big deal. It's just that one of her brothers is trying to kill her and that's why she moved here." And she just goes into like word vomit of an absolute giant, massive pile of lying.
Mhm.
She says her brother's trying to kill her. She found out after her husband died, and he died of, I think did she say he died of a heart attack this time? I can't remember. She says that so many times. But
Mhm.
anyway, she says her husband died, and after he died, she found out that her husband and her brother were working together to kill her for her life insurance.
But of course.
And they just and then she says, "Yeah, now I got to move back to Arizona because he came here and he knocked on this door and he's going to kill me and blah blah." And she is talking 100 miles an hour. They have not asked her anything that would be a reason to talk about any of this.
Mhm.
And she's just going on and how she's going to move back and she's going to live with her friend Melanie and that's where JJ is and blah 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 blah. And it's so obviously lying,
Mhm.
and like she just cannot stop talking. It was ridiculous, and she's kind of flirting, and she just doesn't tell anyone the truth about what she's doing because she's just not safe. And I'm like, that's a thing to tell the cops. I don't tell anyone the truth about what I'm doing. Like, oh, that's
Look at
smart.
me. I'm lying about everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So then she says she has a daughter who's going to BYU and that she lives there with her. I'm like, you just got done telling people that she's living off campus, on campus now. She lives at home, whatever. Um, and also this is where she says that Kay is suing her for custody of JJ and makes it all, really vilifies Kay that she's just so terrible and blah blah blah. And
Mhm.
and the cops are like, "Well, we don't really know anything about any of that stuff, crazy lady. We
Mhm.
just want to make sure your son is okay." Also, they ask, "Well, yeah, our officers were here earlier, and there were two men here that seemed to know you." And so they're asking about Alex and Chad, and she
Right.
says that Alex is her brother, and that Chad is Alex's friend. Now, the police already know that Chad and Lori are married, so
Right.
Chad has lied about not even having her phone number, and
Mhm.
then Lori, they're just friends with he's her brother's friend. And that one officer goes, "Wait a minute. Chad Daybell, that guy that lives out there, he's gesturing to the other police, and they're gesturing toward the Salem area. He's like,
Mhm.
didn't his wife just die? And the other guy's like, yeah, I think he did. Doesn't he have a couple daughters? And Lori goes, oh yeah, he has a bunch of kids. But I mean, it was the biggest lie. Okay.
Mhm.
It was just, and they already knew some of that wasn't true and verified that the rest of it. Oh, was it her girlfriend Melody? Anyway,
Mhm.
yeah. So, they're just kind of listening, and
Mhm.
you can tell that they know.
Yeah, but their heads are probably swimming with
Yeah.
all of the lies and the nonsense and the
Well, she
nonstop
was really
talking.
animated and flipping her
Yeah.
hair around and talking about, she was the victim all the time and blah, blah, blah,
Mhm.
and gave all this detail of information they did not ask for.
Mhm.
So Stubbs said that he knew that she was married to Chad at the time. So he already knew she's lying
Mhm.
to him. And he said, he says he's going to follow up with Melanie Gibb.
Mhm.
So that's when we take a break. So then after the break he's back on the stand, and they had been trying and trying and trying. Officer Hope or Detective Hope, whatever,
Detective, I think. Yeah.
detective had been trying to reach Melanie Gibb, had called her several times, left messages. She just wasn't answering.
Yeah.
So they went back to Lori's house. So then there's another body cam. Um, and they go back there and talk to her again and say, hey, we really need your friend Melanie to call us and talk to us because she's not returning our calls. And this is when she tells the Frozen 2 lie. Oh, they were going to Frozen 2 today. That's probably where they are. That's probably why she's not answering.
Mhm.
And the cops are like, we've literally been calling her all day. Like, she hasn't been at the movie the whole day.
Yeah.
But they're like, okay, please, have her call us. So then the police were able to get a hold of Melanie Gibb, and she said that she did not have JJ and that she wasn't even in Arizona at the time. There was an objection on this from the defense saying that this is hearsay. So they have to do this really roundabout thing to get this information in, because basically they investigated every single one of these lies about JJ being with Melanie, with Tylee going to BYU by BYUI. They investigate all of these statements that she has made. Oh, that her brother went to her apartment and killed her to try to kill her.
Mhm.
They were able to prove that he did not travel
Oh,
to Rexburg, that there was no evidence that he had ever traveled to Rexburg.
yeah. Which
And
also, if someone knocked on your door that was trying to kill you, wouldn't you have called, oh, I don't know,
the
the
police,
police?
right?
Yeah.
And yeah, no, she never had. She was just moving back to Arizona. That was the solution for the whole thing.
Mhm.
So basically, Stubbs says, we investigated all of those statements that she made and could not find truth to any of them.
Yeah.
So that's when they decided they better get a search warrant and figure out
Mhm.
what the hell is going on here. So they issue a no-knock entry warrant to Lori's apartment, and Stubbs films it. So he's just like going around filming every room while they're
Mhm.
searching. So they come into the living room, kitchen area. Stuff's just kind of all over the place. The keys to the apartment are sitting on the counter. Like, I'm piecing out of here. She left the keys there.
Like you'd leave your keys in the hotel room. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. There were Amazon packages that had been delivered that were left at the door. I believe this was the next day from when they first made contact.
Mhm.
They go in the garage. There's couches and tables and guns. Lots and lots of guns.
Yeah.
So then he goes upstairs to the master bedroom and bath. The closet is completely empty. No clothes, nothing. There's
Yeah.
bedding on the bed, and there's a little child's mattress on the floor in that room, which I thought was sobering to
Yeah.
see, because that was
JJ's bed.
obviously JJ's bed.
Yep.
So then he's noticed that there's like a desk area where there's a printer, and there are dust prints from other electronics that have been picked up and taken.
Mhm.
There's also a lease agreement for Lori, and then he spells out the last name, and he does not spell Ryan. He spells Revan or something weird. So that's what I wrote in my tweet initially, because I'm like, is that? Anyway, we get back to it. It was Ryan. She'd used Lori Ryan on the lease, but this was the lease for this apartment. There was a utility closet, another bathroom. Then there was a bedroom that had 2 beds in it, a twin and a double. In there was just some items that were like some winter clothes, but no other clothing. There were no toys. There was nothing that indicated children lived there. Go into another bedroom where they find a guitar and a bag that had toiletries in it that must have been for a male, because it was like shaving stuff. And then the closet there was also mostly empty, except for a couple of samurai swords, as you know, we all have in our closets, I guess. And
those had to be Alex's.
Yeah, I'm sure they were.
Sounds like an Alex thing to do.
I'm sure they were. And then that's where the video ended, and that is where the end of the day ended. It was real anticlimactic because he filmed the other searches too, but we didn't get to see those yet.
Right.
It was very, though, to see the video of that apartment. It looked like an apartment where they just shoved all the stuff that they could take with them in a bag and left, and just dumped it.
Yeah.
Which brother, JR, about the one trying to kill her? We think it's Adam, because Adam and Charles, she takes things that are true and then just twists them, because Adam and Charles were talking about trying to have like an intervention with her that was supposed to happen on the day that Charles was murdered.
Right.
And so she twisted that to they were trying to kill her for her life insurance. But that's kind of where it ended. It really was very striking, though, to see like what the interior of her apartment looked like, because it did look like if you just ran in your house and threw grabbed your clothes and a few toiletries and ran out the door, grabbed your laptop, and just left, all kinds of other stuff behind because you were running. That is exactly what it looked like.
Yep.
That was really, really striking. And
that's the guns.
The guns.
The guns. Alex had purchased. He borrowed $22,000 and had purchased 46 guns.
46 guns.
And a whole bunch of ammo.
Yeah. So it was wild, but you can definitely see that they were very aware at this point that shit was going down. I'm sure at this point that they were pretty sure those kids were dead.
Yeah.
They didn't say that, but you look at the whole situation and the way that she behaved in the house and like.
Yeah. Well, then they go search the storage unit, which we haven't gotten there yet in this trial, but it's full of JJ and Tylee's stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. Which you would think Tylee would need at her dorm or wherever she was living, and JJ would have needed in the house where he was living. So yeah, it was that was really sobering to just see that, to see what they saw and to see her behavior.
Yeah.
So sketchy. So that's where we left off, and there is no court tomorrow because this all went so quickly because the defense is not hardly cross-examining anyone.
Yeah.
And so Stubbs will be back on the stand on Monday with the video of the other searches and probably a lot of other things, because all of the exhibits, the 30 minutes of exhibits, certainly were not explained in his testimony. There's lots more to come, I think, in relation to the phones and a lot of that data.
And obviously, Hermosillo needs to teach a master class on testifying to his colleagues, because he is a rock star on the stand.
He is.
Some of these guys need to take a lesson.
Stubbs definitely does. It was tough because at the beginning he screwed up so much that I really worried about what the jury was really thinking about his credibility.
Yeah.
But then fortunately we see these videos. Well, you can't question that because you can physically see and hear what was happening. One of the things that they did talk about that they didn't totally get into is that there were concerns about the safety of the police going into that apartment because they knew about the shooting that they, were looking for the the Jeep. And
Mhm.
when the first time they went to the house, the first time that Stubbs went to the house, so this was the second visit that day,
Yeah.
Alex, she said Alex is here, but he never came into the conversation. And he could see out of the corner of his eye up at the top of the stairs that someone
Mhm.
was like pacing back and forth up there because he could see like
Mhm.
there was light coming through a window and someone was walking in front of it back and forth. So they had concerns about the safety of the officers. And boy,
There's super good reason, especially then knowing that there was an arsenal in that house.
after that, finding those guns, yeah.
Can you imagine searching that house and finding that many guns? I mean, I know I keep
No.
hammering on that, but seriously.
Who has 46 guns? What the hell do you
Yeah.
need 46 guns for? Yeah, well, we all know what.
Right.
Um, so that was really interesting. But get to see what they saw and hear what they heard on those first couple days, that wow. That
Yeah.
I don't have any doubt that they already were like, yeah, these kids are dead.
Mhm. They had
That's
to
just
have.
my observation, obviously.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
that's what happened today. It was weird. We bounced all around. Um, but I feel like finally we're moving forward in time as far as the
Mhm.
timeline of this case is concerned,
Yeah.
because it has felt like we've sat on Charles's situation till I think everyone was
Like all
damn sick of
week.
it.
Yeah.
We've heard every angle of that situation that you can possibly imagine. It's nice to see things moving forward. So we know coming up, they've still got to talk to Melanie Pulaski, Boudreaux Pulaski, Ian
Mhm.
Pulaski. Are they
Mhm.
going to talk to the storage unit guy that discovered the security cam
Yeah.
and all of that? Those are some things to still come,
Are
on
they
top
gonna
of a
talk to
lot of other
Ian
stuff.
Pulowski's ex-wife?
Yes, are they gonna talk to Natalie Pulowski?
Mhm.
Good question, because she reported a bunch of things too, because Ian started telling her some really scary stuff, and she was
Yeah.
worried for the safety of her own children.
For a
So
good
some of
reason.
those folks we think might be coming up.
Mhm.
One thing we've not seen at all is forensic physical evidence.
Yeah.
We haven't seen any of that yet. We haven't seen nobody has really testified about the autopsies, like the people
Mhm.
who conducted the autopsies.
Mhm.
Haven't seen that yet. So there's a lot to go, most
Yeah.
definitely.
Lori's cell phone pings.
Yes, Lori's
I'm
cell phone pings, we still have not
so
seen that.
anxious to hear about Lori's cell phone pings the way we heard about Alex's
Yes, Alex's and Chad's.
and Tammy's full autopsy.
And yes, Tammy's full autopsy. What have they determined a time of death for her? Because that timeline is all screwed up,
Mhm.
from what's reported to what the state of her body was in.
Yeah.
Right. If there's a medical examiner or whoever it was, because
Mhm.
we don't really have a medical examiner here. So, but if that's
Right, but
somebody coming
Tammy's
from Boise,
exhumation, that was all done in Utah.
yes, it was. So somebody from Utah, then we have from the lab in Idaho. So those are all things that are going to be coming up. I'm sure there's lots more police, and there's got to be more FBI too coming.
Mhm.
So
Oh, definitely. Definitely.
yeah,
Yeah. Mm.
but that's where we ended it for this week. It's kind of a weird week, only 3 days of court.
Yeah. Yeah.
But they said things we're burning through these witnesses really fast,
Mhm.
and you have people scheduled who are planning to like be in Boise on Monday, and everyone is traveling to
Mhm.
this hearing, to this trial. So you can't just say, oh, sorry, we don't need you Monday, we need you tomorrow. That just, it's
Yeah.
not going to work. So that's why they
Right.
canceled for tomorrow.
But, consider that initially when this was still a death penalty case, they said it was going to be a 10-week trial.
Yeah.
Now, and then we figured it would be less because, but I believe they did tell the jury 8 to 10 weeks.
Hmm.
But I'm sitting at 5 or 6, don't you think?
Yes, because I just don't really think the defense is going to present a whole lot.
I was thinking today about what is it going to look like when the jury goes out for deliberations.
Hmm.
I don't think the jury's going to deliberate for very long. I don't. But then what? For us here in the Madison viewing room, then
I
what?
know. Then
How is
what?
this going to work?
If they will set like the next morning, because a lot of times when a jury comes back, they go immediately into court to hear the verdict.
Yeah.
And will they just do that and say, you guys are out of luck? I don't know. It's possible.
Well, or will they stream it? And if happen to hear that the jury's back, I mean, we'll just have to keep a really close eye
Hmm.
on Nate Eaton, probably,
Hmm.
or Alex, or some of the other reporters down there.
Yeah.
But and if we see them report that the jury's back, we will have to be hightailing it to the Madison courthouse. That's all I can
Hmm.
imagine. I don't know. I
Right.
I really want us to be able to be present
Yeah. I do too.
for the reading of the verdict, but
But
I just wonder how that's going to work.
mhm. And will sentencing be immediate?
I doubt it. This judge doesn't do anything immediate.
But he doesn't take a long time. I mean,
No.
could it be like the next day? I don't think it's going to be a long wait.
No, I think it'd be a day or two. He really likes to do his research.
He does. That's true. He does. But I don't think he'll drag it out. Like they sometimes put it out months. I don't think that's going to happen here.
I'd be really surprised if well, but then again, I mean, no, it probably will be a little ways out because there will still be victims' impact statements. I mean, they're the victims' families, this is kind of their time to shine. They'll still have opportunities to show
That's
up.
true.
So it could be pushed out further than you think.
It could be. That is true. Ugh. I don't know. At this point, I'm like, it's like we're running for the finish line.
Hmm.
Just get there.
Right, for sure.
Yeah.
So there had been some conversation about, we had been asked in the past, will Lori, in between sentencing or conviction and sentencing, if conviction happens, uh, if she would return to the Madison County Jail. Our understanding is that she will not, that she'll remain in Boise
She's going to
until
end
she's
up in
sentenced.
Boise anyway. There's an assessment facility that she would go through first through the
Hmm.
Department of Corrections before she's then housed at wherever she's going to be housed permanently.
Hmm.
Or then there might be some decisions made by Arizona if they're going to extradite her immediately or what they're going to do. So
Right.
there's just no reason to bring her back to Madison.
No, no, but they won't. The Madison County Jail believes that they are done with her for good. So,
Yeah. Yep. All right. Well, that's the crazy day in court.
yeah.
And we'll be back next week with more shenanigans. And I think Lying Liars episode was a great title for this because there was a
Thank you so
lot of
much.
lying liars today. Oh, but we're going to let you go with that. So do not forget to like, subscribe, share, and comment. We appreciate all of you so much. If you want to support us, this is a huge amount of work on our part. You
Mhm.
can go to our website, which is truecrimesquad.com. You can buy us a coffee there. You can give us a tip on PayPal. Those things are much appreciated because this is a huge time burden we are taking on right now, as I'm sure you all
Uh-huh.
are too, because you're here watching these.
Yeah.
And we appreciate that. So if you want
And
to
we
support
wouldn't
us,
do it
that
any
is a way.
differently. Don't get us
No,
wrong.
we're
We're
very
here
glad
for
to
it.
finally
Yeah.
be here, definitely. But yeah, it's a lot. It is
Whew.
a lot.
It's all we can think
Well,
about.
yeah,
I get in bed at night and just have to drain my brain because I'm
right.
still
Like
I'm in court mode and thinking and whew.
I know, I'm getting tired of it. I'm getting tired of that part. I know.
Lots
I
of
come home
TikTok.
and just watch funny videos on TikTok. Like I got to
Yep.
get away from this for a while. Well,
TikTok is the happy distraction.
yes, it is. Mhm. Well, you know what? We are the True Crime Squad. Thanks for being here.
Take care.